You know that gut-sinking moment when somebody shows up and tells you your family's place doesn't belong to you anymore? That's where this all starts. 3 little words on a thin piece of paper. Unauthorized use of common land. I remember reading it on my kitchen table and feeling like the floor dropped out from under me, like a picture frame falling and shattering in slow motion. My name is Liam Harper. The cabin behind the old maple isn't just a building, it's summer barbecues with my dad. The dent in the second step from the time my daughter tripped, the smell of coffee at dawn, the long lazy evenings where the whole family sat in mismatched chairs and talked about nothing. We bought the lot out of Grandpa's estate 5 years ago. There were deeds, surveys, signatures, everything by the book. Still, someone in the neighborhood association decided the line between their jurisdiction and our land was flexible. At first it was little things. A notice about a non-compliant structure, the shed my family's had since before I moved in. A citation for improper signage, because someone didn't like the weathered no trespassing board by the dock. New rules about community aesthetics appeared like weeds, ridiculous regulations about paint shades and plant heights, as if someone could legislate the way light falls across my porch. I wrote emails, calm ones. I picked up the phone and called. I tried the polite route because that's been how I've gotten along with most people. Then Marcy showed up with a clipboard. Marcy had the kind of haircut that made you think of efficiency, a concise suit, a smile that never touched her eyes. "We're trying to keep this community safe," she said, and I wanted so badly to believe her. But there was something in the way she used the word "we" that felt less about safety and more about control. She handed me a stack of notices and signatures and squinted at my deed like it was an inconvenient anecdote. I started to collect my own paper trail: the closing settlement, the county survey stamped with coordinates, old mail addressed to Liam Harper, Lakeside Cabin. I filmed the property lines with my phone. I walked the boundary with a tape measure. I sat up late reading through filings. That part felt like detective work and like prayer. If I could show the record, maybe the record would speak louder than rumor. Neighbors split. A handful of folks brought casseroles and offered to mow the lawn. Others crossed the street to avoid eye contact. The frightening part was how fast people learned to believe the version that made them comfortable, the story that painted us as outsiders. I'd helped one neighbor fix a fence last summer, and he stopped answering my waves. That kind of cold is worse than confrontation. It's erasure. At the next HOA meeting, they called an emergency vote to revoke our access to the dock and the walking trails. Marcy put up photographs with dates circled in red, a map marked in thick lines, and 2 board members who, inconveniently, had ties to a developer eyeing the shoreline. The meeting felt less like governance and more like theater. I stood up and asked for an independent review, for time to produce documents. I didn't shout, but my voice tightened. They called it a procedural necessity and pushed forward. A contractor showed up one rainy Tuesday with a truck and a clipboard and started hauling our dock planks into the back. I stood in my kitchen in socks and watched Grandpa's boards disappear into the bed of a truck. I went outside barefoot and asked to see the contract. The contractor mumbled that the HOA had ordered safety repairs and gestured toward an envelope the size of a handbook. Paperwork didn't match what I'd been shown at the meeting. For the first time, this felt less like rules being enforced and more like a playbook for dispossession. I made a choice most people avoid. I went public. I shot a raw video on my phone, shaky at first, and I explained who I was, where the deed was, and how the dates didn't line up. I put the video on the community page and wrote, "This is our side." Within an hour, the comments were of fever support, helpful tips, ugly assumptions, and a neighbor who posted scanned copies of a handwritten note that undermined the HOA's timeline. Marcy didn't like that. She came to my driveway the next morning with the kind of cold composure that's been practiced. "You should have come through channels," she said. Translation: "You should have kept quiet." I told her I'd tried. She leaned in and said softly, "You made this personal." That's when I realized that in their mind, civility was shorthand for obedience. Then an anonymous packet of board emails slid into my inbox, sent by someone with access. Messy, candid messages about making an example, about budget lines for temporary removal of structures, a reference to speeding up plans for shoreline development. I read them at 2 in the morning, the house quiet except for the heater, and felt the same hollowing out I'd felt when I first saw the notice. These emails were the crack in the facade, not explosive, but enough for light to get through. We filed for an injunction to stop demolition and force a proper review. Courtrooms are strange places where the rawness of life is folded into formal statements. Plaintiff shows a likelihood of success on the merits. I felt relieved because the law required documents, and documents favor paper over rumor. The judge set a hearing, and suddenly the HOA shifted from confident to frantic. Meetings were rescheduled, notices rescinded, and there was a flurry of last-minute memos that read like damage control. The hearing felt like a small, decisive theater. Marcy read a prepared statement with a steady voice. I spoke without a script, stitching memories to evidence. My lawyer held up the county survey and pointed to a red line that matched our deed. The neighbors' faces I knew from block parties leaned forward. The judge looked at the map, at the signatures, and said plainly that evidence matters. He granted the injunction. The doc stayed. After that came the audit. It turned up expected things and messy ones. A couple board members with financial links to the developer, invoices that looked doctored, and a rushed meeting where proper notice hadn't been given. The HOA removed 2 problematic members and brought in new management. Marcy resigned, polite on paper, and people said she left muttering about this isn't the end. For me, the win was more complicated than a headline. We had our dock back. Yes, but the trust was fractured. My daughter ran out and dove off the dock the afternoon it was returned. She came up laughing and coughing, and the world for a minute felt uncomplicated. I laughed too, a short, raw thing that was equal parts relief and fatigue. But the neighborhood had changed. Conversations that used to be about recipes and lawnmowers turned into debates about power, property, and who gets to decide. What I learned was sharp and a little ugly. Property is memory and leverage. The people who want control will search for ambiguity and exploit it. Politeness and paperwork sometimes aren't enough. You have to document, you have to connect, and you have to be ready to make noise. I learned to keep multiple copies of everything, to check records regularly, and to talk to neighbors before a rumor starts to shape the facts. Still, the ending isn't tidy. A developer quietly bought a neighboring lot in winter, and even with cleaner bylaws, there are whispers of future plans. We didn't slay a dragon. We held the line long enough to force accountability. That felt like a win for now. So what about you? Would you have taken it public or kept fighting in whispers and meetings? Did I make drama where discretion could work, or did I do what needed to be done to protect a place that holds a lifetime of memory? Drop a comment and tell me how you'd handle it, or share your own HOA nightmare. If this mattered to you, share it with someone who lives under rules that can be bent, and if you haven't already, subscribe. There are more stories like this, and sometimes the quiet ones need a voice. Leave a comment, share the video with someone who needs to hear this, and tell me, did I do the right thing?